ability to hide in cyberspace was a great place for criminals, psychopaths, child predators, and all that. So in 2010, I wrote a theoretical construct called iPredator. Now, iPredator is made up of 8 typologies, in which cyberbullying happens to be one of them. And I'll just say them real quick. So there's cyberbullying, cyberstalking, cybercrime, cyberterrorism, internet trolls, cyber harassment, online child predators, and the one that I added last year is online child pornography, distribution and consumption. So iPredator is made up of 8 different typologies of online assailants. So it is cyberbullying plus plenty of others.
That's fascinating. You know, my first question is, when you did all that research, you didn't find yourself being recruited by the FBI for our behavioral sciences unit?
No. I mean, I've consulted with not active federal agents, but retired. I've spoken and helped and assisted from parents to teachers to federal agents, and hopefully with time, my goal is essentially to get society, hopefully America, to realize that we all have got to wake up. And yes, offline you have crime, you have pedophilia, you've got deviance. But if you think from the criminal mind standpoint, remember, as I said, dark psychology, and that's what I study, is that if I'm a criminal, if I'm a psychopath, where else is it better to be but in cyberspace? Why? Because I can hide myself. I can be who I want, whatever identity I want to make, whatever I can hide in cyberspace, and I can pretend to be whoever I want. So if I'm a criminal, then what a great place.
Exactly. Let me ask you something about bullying. Because obviously, the cyber world that we're in now didn't exist when you and I were kids. I'm a tad older than you. But I think of, myself, when I used to get picked on. I was a skinny kid, hardly a tough guy when I was young. But bullying back then, or being picked on, I think of, it seemed less aggressive, less mean. I understand that cyber creates this new opportunity. But now when we look at the bullying in general, it just seems meaner. I mean, back then, someone picked on you, they shoved you, whatever. You had a fight, you said, "Uncle," you shook hands. It tended to be over. Now with kids, we worry, don't get in a fight. They're going to come back with a knife or a gun. Just other tendencies to be just much more mean is the best word I could come up with. So has the concept of bullying, never mind cyber, just bullying in general, changed over the years? Are we a different society?
Wow, I should call you doctor, because that was excellent what you just said. And not to toot my own horn, but many of your listeners who study criminal psychology and criminology, I'm sure is familiar with the name Stanton Samenow, Dr. Stanton Samenow. He wrote, I actually had to read it back in grad school, he wrote Inside the Criminal Mind back in 1984. Well, 2 years ago, after 30 years, he wrote the updated revise of Inside the Criminal Mind. Well, guess who we quoted on page 63? I almost wanted to get a tattoo on 63, because Dr. Samenow actually quoted me. And what did he quote me about is about cyberbullying. And God bless Dr. Samenow, and anybody, I haven't spoken to him in some time, but he's a lot older than I, but he is considered one of the fathers of modern forensics and criminology, Stanton Samenow. And in his book on 63, he specifically mentions, he quotes me, and as it relates to cyberbullying, is that when you and I were kids and we had the crap beat out of us and we were bullied, well, after we could go home, we had sanctuary, we had respite, we could go back to our neighborhoods, we could run from the ball field. Today, with cyberbullying, it is 24/7, 365. So today's targets, I hate to use the word victim, so I say cyberbullying targets, they have no escape. They have no sanctuary, and they have no way to escape from being targeted. And that is one of the primary differences.
Right, but again, let's draw a parallel. I could think again, after we had the fight, and let's say whatever it was, or a basketball game, it was over. It didn't go on. You didn't show up the next day. So I know that again, the cyber is giving them an opportunity to continue on. So do they have greater motivation again to be meaner and crueler because they have this tool, Or
Oh,
is it?
most certainly. Well, because now and today's children of the information age, they know. Obviously they don't know the fine details of social media, but they know that there's a public forum. That they know that there, what do you want to call it, your wall, or your feeds, or your friends, or your insert, whatever you want to say. They know essentially there's a public forum. So. And again, and I do want your listeners, and this is my definition, and presently, cyberbullying is considered, at least here in the United States, a pediatric phenomena. It is considered that it occurs among minors. So when we're dealing with adults, you then move into, you would use the terms, and not that, people could still say cyberbullying because there's workplace bullying, but you have cyberstalking, cyber harassment, internet trolls. So when I speak of cyberbullying, I'm talking about minors, all right?
Okay.
But what we're seeing is, again, and a lot of what I've developed my theories, I can tell you right now, is a lot of it is theoretical. I don't have, hopefully someday there'll be research that proves all of my nonsense, okay? To me, it's quite common sense. But what we're seeing is, and I know this anecdotally from all the people that call me because I provide, free advice, consultation to help the folks, is that kids are being psychologically devastated. One of the newest terms that never occurred before is called cyberbullying. And for your listeners, that is when kids actually commit suicide. Why? Not because they're being bullied face-to-face, albeit that occurs, but because they're being targeted online. And they're incessantly targeted, and they're targeted to the point where they ultimately take their lives. The term cyberbullying.
And we've heard that, unfortunately, fairly often. As shocking as it is when we hear it, we can't believe it happened, but it's not like it's never happened before. So
Correct.
That's kind of troubling. So, you talk about it being primarily, youth. Now, you and I didn't grow up in that age, and plus we'd like to think that as you would mature, you just stop bullying. But let's talk about people who are somewhat older and they engage in like revenge porn, and you have an older crowd that would do that.
Yep.
I think by nature of it. Is that someone you would think someone who maybe has come into adulthood during the cyber era, and then you'll just seize that as a natural way to bully, or is that a different phenomenon?
No, it's both a different phenomena and it's the same phenomena. So let me reduce my entire theory into three, and anybody can see. It comes down to three criteria that you would meet, or anybody would become an eye predator. One is a self-awareness of causing harm to others directly or indirectly using ICT. ICT being information communications technology. Two, the usage of IT to obtain, exchange, and deliver harmful information. And number three, a general understanding of cyber stealth, which we can talk about later, used to engage in criminal or deviant activities or to profile, identify, locate, stalk, or engage a target. So essentially, in the generation that we're in and going forward, because the information age began roughly around 1983, it's people that use information technology to target others for nefarious, felonious, and malevolent reasons. All right? And
Right.
That is why under the eye predator construct, there are 8 typologies. Essentially, those 8 typologies are flavors of, let's say, ice cream. But they are all rooted in malevolence, to hurt others.
Mm-hmm. Right. So let's talk about these kids. So would I look at them and say these were the bullies of our day, just in the cyber world? And tell us about what type of kid this is, what you're seeing in terms of, the mindset. Who is this eye predator?
Well, what we're seeing is it's the same as when you and I were growing up, is those, back when I was a kid, I was bullied. I'm not going to bring up their names, although I'm 53 years old, and I still remember my bullies. And I guarantee your listeners, when they were bullied, if they weren't the bullies, they remember their bullies. So, but when we were young, we grew up in a pre-information age world. And what your listeners have to understand, because I'm assuming many of them have children themselves, one of the phenomena that I've learned, because I help so many different people, is that they look at their kids and they can't understand why their children are taking it so seriously, why they're being so impacted. The reality is that the children of the information age, they wake up, with Instagram and technology, and they go, and my belief, I can't prove this yet, is that during self-identity formation, during puberty, whereas when you and I were going through puberty, we thought of Playboy and naked and boobs and butts and so forth and so on. Well, today, today's kids think of the same kind of stuff, but for them, they're incorporating as part of their self-identity technology and what's being said on social media and what's being said about them on Instagram. And the other part being, and this is, I don't want to get too heavy into psychology, they know things that they exchange, disseminate, and compile, they know that information is being seen by others.
Okay, and don't be afraid, Michael, to get into the psychology, because I think we want to hear about that. Tell us about the psychology of these predators. What are they thinking? What kind of kids are they?
It depends now.
I'm sorry. Are we talking about nurture versus nature, or a combination of both? Tell us all about.
Well, I think there's again, what I would hope that your listeners would do. By the way, my website, for anybody who goes there, everything I have created is public domain. So you don't even have to give me attribution. The only thing I ask from your listeners, and I say this to everyone, is that you help. You don't have to give me any money. My stuff is starting to take off. God bless, as we move on. But, you can go to my website, and if you click on the construct section, you can read anything from online psychopathy to, online child predators and all of that. So for me, to be quite honest, I'm still learning. Because I'm not a child of the information age. I grew up I'm kind of like last year baby boomer, first year X-Gen. It just happened that I was so into studying the criminal mind that I walked and I realized that if I was criminal and I was a deviant, well, where better else would I go if I wanted to target you, if I wanted to molest you, if I wanted to steal from you? Well, goodness, the dark side of cyberspace.
All right. Okay, let's just answer a couple of questions that are already coming in. The first question is, can people just unplug from the internet to avoid cyberbullying? I guess, Michael, the issue there is that they know it's happening. They want to be on Facebook like anybody else. So just unplugging won't stop it. It just won't let them see it, but it'll take away their advantages and their fun of enjoying the internet and social media. Am I correct? And how would you respond to that?
Well, the way I would respond, and I used to hear this all the time, and no longer, what do you want us to do, Dr. Nuccitelli, turn off the internet? I mean, I've heard that 1,000 times, and my response is no, because we can't. All right, for your listeners, we live in the information age, which began roughly around 1983. Now we are inundated with it. So whether you're a child, whether you're an adult, we are surrounded by technology. So you can't turn it off. You can't tell a child presently, you can't even tell an adult anymore, is to turn it off, because it's part of their existence and their life and their identity. For instance, today's children, now what we're learning, it's becoming bigger, it's called VLE. Google it, virtual learning environments. Eventually, it may take a couple of decades, there's not going to be brick and mortar schools. Now, they'll exist, but everything is moving to VLE, virtual learning environments, to where now I won't even have to go to school. I'll learn online.
Right.
So to make this assumption that we can just turn it off, for you and I, it's common sense. Just turn it off. But for today's kids,
I can't.
Can't.
I have two businesses that I run, both internet-based. And when I start going crazy because, my network isn't working, the print is disconnected, my wife always says, oh, that's a problem with, having, this internet-based business. I said, yeah, but if it wasn't for the internet, I wouldn't have those businesses. So, it's kind of, you can't get away from it. That is the nature of the business.
And if we discuss towards the end of the show about internet safety tips, that is the worst thing you can do is to turn it off. Because if you turn on, whether you're a professional, whether you're a business, whether you're a politician, whoever you are, if you turn off technology, you better be damn sure that you're never going to be targeted. Because if you get targeted and you don't have an online presence, well, somebody's going to Google your name, even if you're John Smith, and all the garbage, if somebody's targeting you, it's going to come up on first page Google.
Right. And I'm glad you brought up a point about internet safety. So Rel Gray, who asked a question about what can we do as parents, Max, if you give us a 10-minute warning before the end of the show, let's remember to ask that question of Dr. Nuccitelli there. So we have another question here from Mark Mallon. So social media gives people dopamine drip. Is it really addictive, and is that why kids just can't back off? What do you think?
One of the things, again, there's a huge dispute back when and I'll go psychologist, the DSM-5, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Psychiatric Disorders. The DSM-5, which came out a couple of years ago, there was a huge controversy over whether or not to include internet use disorder, internet addiction. Ultimately, what they included in the back is internet use gaming disorder. All right. So now here we are in America, and it's not included in the DSM, so it's not recognized as a full ICD-10 code. But yet, you got two camps. You've got those that subscribe to the notion that internet addiction exists, and then you got others that say, no, it doesn't exist. For your listeners, they can go to my website. I created, and I spent a lot of time, is a huge internet addiction assessment test that you can take right there online. You just got to print it out and you click it off, and if you score a certain number, well, you're compulsive dependent. I personally believe that internet addiction does exist. I mean, in fact, if some of the Asian countries, is it South Korea, one of the Korean countries, or is that they actually have internet addiction inpatient treatment facilities. And slowly but surely here in America, you're starting to slowly see, I don't know of any inpatient programs here in the States where internet addiction is being addressed.
Interesting.
So the question is, the last research that I read, on average, the adolescent teenager spends anywhere daily between 6 and 8 hours online.
A lot of time not being social, not being physically active, right?
Well, they're being social.
I take that back, right? But not being physically active and not interfacing in a way that you and I used to know, like playing stickball on the streets or just making things work. Right.
One of the things, right, and this goes into my forensics, is that by you and I discussing everything socially via social media, what I don't do, because the primary way the Homo sapien, us sentient beings, communicate and to recognize is through nonverbal communication. Mm-hmm. That is one of the biggest things that is lost doing this Instagram and doing everything from a technological standpoint, is that we lose that capacity to read people.
And do we try to make up for that through emoticons and little thumbs up and stuff like that? Is that what we're trying to do? Is to compensate for that?
That is correct. That is correct. But what we're seeing is more and more, and again, to get a little bit away from cyberbullying. So then when you have like cyberstalking being, which applies to children, but most, as adults as well, is where direct and indirect habitual threats of physical harm. Cybercrime, what we all know about, which is identity theft, which is hacking, which is all this other nonsense. But one of the facets, do you know, and this is the feds, it came out a couple of years ago, one of the the most profitable internet business is, the highest profit, online child pornography. Has the highest profit margin, and that is... So that speaks to the dark side of cyberspace. Meanwhile, I'm not even talking darknet. I'm talking just regular internet. Now, when you go into the darknet, last thing I read is there were 23,000 plus groups in the darknet that involve child pornography. And again, it's understanding the nature of the dark side of the mind. Is that if you're a criminal, if you are a violent, deviant psychopath, well, goodness, where better else to go but cyberspace?
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's a troubling statistic. Let's go to the cyberbullying, back to that. So how is it manifesting itself? What are kids doing to each other in terms of cyberbullying? What do we see going on out there?
Well, the last thing I did is the other good news is not good. Well, I guess it's good news, is that I had the honor in late 2016 and in 2017. I presented all my staff before the state of Vermont and the state of Colorado, their state psychological associations. I spent full days in training presenting to all the psychologists and all the people that attended about what you're asking about right now in relationship to cyberbullying, but it also applies to internet trolls and with adults. If you go to my website, there are 40 different cyberbullying tactics that I think I was up to 41. Yeah. And it's just different methodologies, different techniques and tactics that kids use, but adults use them as well with each other to target one another. So you've got exclusion. There's 41 different ones, So, most importantly for your listeners is to understand that this is real, this exists, and now 2020 is the beginning of IoT, the Internet of Things. And when IoT begins, which is, and you can Google IoT or Internet of Things, is when all industrialized nations put an emphasis on smart technology, where I kiddingly say it's kind of like your toaster now talks to you. Mm-hmm. All right, we're already starting to see all the benefits of technology. Well, what are the two greatest concerns of all major industries in relationship to IoT? Is cybersecurity and privacy. Well, the online assailant, which we're talking about, well, they're the ones that are going to be targeting our cybersecurity and targeting our privacy. Mm-hmm. Let alone, we're not even going to get into cyber terrorism and what nations will be doing to one another. Right now, we're just talking about, little communities in the county over. I'm getting targeted by my ex-girlfriend's boyfriend, blah, 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 blah.
Right. So you deal in your practice with people who've been victims of this cyber.
Well, what I do is I offer free consultation and advice to anybody. I've gotten calls from the south of France, from Australia. By day I work as a psychologist, but on the weekends at night and for quite some time, well, for the last, close to 10 years, I offer free consultation and advice, no charge to people, and I've heard everything under the sun.
So tell us, again, respecting people's privacy, obviously, tell us some of those stories you've heard. How is it manifesting itself? What are these victims, you said targets, what are they suffering from in terms of the actual acts?
I can tell you the worst, without getting perverted, I can tell you the worst, which a couple of years ago, is a woman. She would, with a video camera in her bathroom, she would take her 2-year-old in the bathtub and she would perform oral sex on her 2-year-old female child in front of the camera. And all those that were chiming in who would pay would be able to see what she was doing. That, to me, sticks out. And again, please understand for you and your listeners, I'm a forensic psychologist. In a pre-information age world, I did forensic assessments with some nasty characters. That, to me, kind of sticks out. I've done evaluations.
I can't think of anything sicker than that, Michael. Why wouldn't that stick out? And as far as you know, do people call, authorities when they see that?
Well, no, the ones that were chiming in, they were paying money. When we're dealing with online child pornography, nobody's going to call in. They're masturbating to this stuff. They're recording it.
Let's move on. This is just too disturbing. It's just too disturbing. Let's talk about what we see kind of on TV. We see young kids committing suicide, what you talked about earlier. What's happening to these kids? Our preteens, the young kids that just constantly barraged by this cybercrime. what's happening to them, literally in terms of what kind of cybercrime, what are kids doing to them, and tell us about what happens to them in their mind that leads sometimes to suicide.
Well, again, and I hate to say that, we don't know, because for your listeners, all right, periods of history, the Industrial Age, the Stone Age, the Bronze Age, no matter where you go back since the beginning of human civilization, there was always these periods of history. We are in the information age. So now we have children that are living in the information age that are getting targeted. We don't have research. We've yet to see what happens when you're getting targeted, when you're getting, when you're suffering character assassination, when you're having to worry, 24/7, 365 about, and as you mentioned before, revenge porn, sextortion, and on and on and on. We really don't know yet what it does to the human mind. Now, we can make suppositions, common sense would say it'd be very destructive, but we don't have real hard evidence yet because we don't have any longitudinal data because the information age hasn't been around long enough.
Right. Okay, and so what are they doing? My kids are a little older. They went through school really before the cyberbullying and became something. So is it a matter of, again, talking about, let's say, junior high or middle school and high school kids? What is it more? Is it just saying nasty things? Is it, making accusations about people's character? What are they doing to each other in terms of cyberbullying?
Well, right, if I may, for parents, if your child is between 11 and 14 years old, that's where you have to be the most concerned. Okay. Obviously, and it's going to get younger with time, but presently right now between 11 and 14. Not to say that, 15 and older or younger than 11 is of concern, but that is the primary targeted age from a developmental standpoint and also the primary targeted age for online child predators. Okay, outside of that, what we're seeing is that if my identity, it's kind of hard to say in such a quick way, but try to go back when you were going through puberty, okay? For me, that was many years ago, But when I was a kid, my recollection is what, the girl was saying to me in the classroom next to me, that meant something. Well, now it's not only being said to me and to my friends, it's now being published online. So when you take into that consideration the effect, and then the other thing that, and children, they know this, and all of us need to know this, anything we disseminate, exchange, and sometimes compile is eternal in cyberspace. So if you disseminate something online, or you exchange something, no matter how mad or how noxious you get or how volatile, it is eternal. You can delete it, but it's not gone. It's always accessible.
Mike, let me
and
ask
people
you,
forget that.
Okay, let me ask you a question. Again, being an armchair social psychologist, and now when I do training on workplace violence, I do for organizations, one of the things I mention in the fact that the environment is very important in terms of whether or not you will experience workplace violence. And I talk about embarrassment and humiliation. And when people get embarrassed, we spend a lot of time in our life trying to avoid embarrassment. All right? There's books written about that. And as your level of embarrassment goes up, one of the things that creates that is more than, like if it's just you and I talking and I say something stupid, I might be embarrassed. If I do something now, say something really stupid with all my listeners listening or watching, I might be humiliated. The more people that see you and judge you, or at least in your own mind, create that higher level of humiliation.
Most certainly, Doctor.
Right.
Excellent point.
When it comes
to...
So what I'm saying is in the workplace environment, and I'm always speaking about adults, as that level of humiliation increases, we know that people start thinking more about violence in terms of retaliation for this kind of humiliation. So bring it down now to the level of a child now. As you're saying now, it's getting posted out there, and they're imagining all their friends and people they know and don't know looking at this, laughing at them. Are we creating a child who, besides, never mind being suicidal, might be the next school shooter or someone violent because of this increasing level of humiliation?
I would say yes, but we have yet to have research or data that would, concur with what I'm saying. I would say, to me, it's common sense, But again, when you bring up workplace violence, okay, we also look at workplace bullying, which has been around for forever. Well, now what's happening is we're beginning to see that, let's just say workplace bullying, which occurs among adults, is that it's increasingly including and becoming more prominent is online workplace bullying. And obviously workplace bullying face-to-face when you're on the job and all the crap that goes on there, yes, that's traumatizing, but we're seeing increasingly it's the stuff that goes online that is beginning to have an effect.
Right, yes. And again, for the same reasons. Someone has a question here. Michael, we kind of made the allusion to, being bullied when we were kids. Now it's just another platform, a way of doing it that is probably more harmful psychologically. But someone's asking, is this just sort of innate behavior? If it is, can we really control it? Can we teach kids and adults not to cyberbully, or any more so than we could teach them not to bully or misbehave as they do growing up? Is there some different approach we take now as opposed to the bullying of old? Or is it the same personality quirk?
That is an excellent question. Boy, that's a really good question. Is that bullying has always existed?
We have a good audience.
Well, yes, you do. Yeah. Bullying has always existed. Bullying always will exist. Okay, but now cyberbullying takes on a whole new flavor, so that it is paramount to teach children, and again, prevention education, I hate to say it, is digital citizenship, netiquette, and to understand the impact of online abuse. So, there's no way to eradicate bullying and cyberbullying. It's always going to be there. What we do know is that most cyberbullying, if we're going to talk about kids, most cyberbullying occurs along with bullying. So you have the offline bullying, but then you have the online bullying. So going forward, it's teaching children very early on that you need to have a different demeanor when it comes to cyberspace.
Right. And one of the questions that came up here earlier, and I think you kind of addressed it, but maybe go into it again, is, are people empowered by their anonymity?
Ooh, yes, most certainly. Okay, because I call it the veil of anonymity, because with anonymity, guess what? There's no accountability. All right. We have, and anybody's welcome to contact me if they want to join. We have for the last 5 years, I set this up 5 years ago, it's called CANE, the acronym. I also have a page on the website, the Cyber Attack Investigation Network, and on Google+, but we also deal with Twitter and Facebook, a little bit of Instagram. It's called CANE, Cyber Attack Investigation Network. We've got 2 private communities. One community deals solely with online child predators and child pornography. The other deals with internet trolls, cyber harassment, and cyber stalking. If anybody wants to join, they can contact me. They would just need a G play and come in and you don't have to participate. We've got like 80 plus volunteers in both, and you will see firsthand really what's going on. Proof is in the pudding. I've had people, kind of like castigate me, saying it's really not that bad. And I'm like, all right, well, come in the kid and see for yourself what online users are saying and doing to one another. Proof is in the pudding. It's amazing when people get online, again, and this goes into some of the real heavy psychodynamics of what I believe when it comes to iPredator, is that because I can hide behind an online identity, all right, I can take on another identity. All right, and I know that sounds a little quirky, and I'm still trying to work out the elements of that. But what I believe in, and I'm starting to see this, is that my online identity can confuse my offline identity. So if I have this veil of anonymity, and when I go online and I'm some big oh, I'm trying not to use New York profanity. If I can go online and I get validation from just one other person when I target you or your race or your religion, your political orientation, or I character assassinate you, and somebody pats me on the proverbial back, well, now all of a sudden, what does that do? That strokes my ego. But yet this is all occurring in cyberspace.
Right.
So what I'm starting to see, and eventually I'm going to write a paper on it. I call it fantasist, fantasist, is when the confusion of my online identity becomes increasingly confused of my offline identity. Maybe someday down the road, if we have another show, I'll tell you about some of my personal experiences of getting cyber attacked, is what led me to develop all this stuff of troll triad, of the fantasy. You would be shocked. I don't want to say shocked. Well, not you would be shocked because you're from the world of criminology, so you wouldn't be shocked. But maybe some of your listeners would be like, wow.
You know, Michael, it's funny, not humorous that you say that, because I'm finding, even in retirement now, I've been retired more than 10 years, I'm still getting shocked by things I've heard, even when I thought I've heard it all. And one of the first shows we dealt with, and you might remember the story down in Florida, the 4 young teens who watched someone drowning, and rather than doing anything to help, they sat there and they videotaped it and made fun of the guy. Do you remember that story?
Yeah.
I mean, in a sense, it's almost cyberbullying. I mean, the guy died while they're filming it, and they put it out there, like it was enjoyment. It was fun. I mean, to me, that was just the most insane, sick thing to do, yet they sit there and they enjoy it. And my question back then was, I don't care that it's cyber, how did we get to a point of such inhumanity in young kids?
Well, I mean, again, going into the sociological, again, I'm not a religious man. I'm a spiritual man. But I believe that, over the last several decades, the slow, erosion of family. And again, I don't want to push family values, but I believe that, society. And again, I hold accountable a portion, not all of it, is technology. Because with technology, dude, I don't need to see you face to face. I can talk to you online, and I can use my mobile device for my entire life. When you have today's kids online, and now we're finding more and more it's on their cell phones. It's not even desktops in the center of the household. It's now on my mobile device, 6 to 8 hours.
Right.
6 to 8, and that's predicted to even increase. And now when you throw in VLE, virtual learning environments, and you now have with IoT coming in that is going to encourage all of us, from child through adult, to spend even more time online and make it more, attractive and beneficial. Well, goodness, I don't want to say we're becoming automatons, but we're moving into this realm where you might as well just with an intravenous, just with nanobots, so that I can think Google and think Instagram in my blood as opposed to having to go online.
All right. Let me ask you about a specific problem, because I'm thinking back now, right before I retired, again, was over 10 years ago. One of the problems we were having with young kids especially was sextortion, as we called it. And
one
it seemed
of the biggest trends.
Okay, and that was my question. It seems to still be a trend now. Most of it, really for the parents listening right now, more so than young kids who know what it is. Tell us a little bit about that, and what can we do to help protect the young girls who are always the victim of this, and what can we do to educate young boys as to the danger as to what they're doing?
It's got to start very early. And I hate to be, sitting here and saying prevention education, because that's what's been said for generations. But sextortion is an incredibly devastating phenomenon. It needs to be a legal statute. It needs to be criminalized in all states. There needs to be major punitive measures, because sextortion is, as you know, is sexual blackmail.
Right. Let's explain to parents what exactly.
Well, you and I are freshmen in high school, and we've been dating, and we sexted one another, and you sent me a couple of nudie pictures, whatever. Let's say we're boy and girl. And now that we break up, okay, and now I'm now saying, well, unless you do it again for me, or unless you jump through these hoops, I am going to send that sexually themed content to your school, your parents, your friends, and I'm going to publish it everywhere. Sextortion.
Right.
And what's happening is we as adults have to but it happens to adults as well, is that we have to understand the devastation and the fear it causes the target. And it's not just children. Obviously, children psychologically are not prepared. Adults aren't prepared. But sextortion is incredibly, incredibly devastating to the child and the adult.
Right. Let me see, Max, it might sound okay because I have a little problem with the mic. We're good. All right. Right. So exactly. So we get these kids, again, mostly males. They convince these girls to send them revealing pictures of themselves. It's online. As you said, once it's online, it doesn't disappear. And then they extort them to send more or do other things with the threat of exposing them. Do we find that, or do we know, is it more young kids, boys of the same age, or does it tend to be older boys that know how more to manipulate these young girls who do this, or do we not have a good handle on that?
We don't have a good handle on it. From my experience and from folks I've helped, it's across the board. It is. Obviously, we have to worry about children, but it's happening across the board. As we age, particularly once we reach our teens and we get to college age, and again, let's not assume it's just happening to families, to females, because we do have to take into consideration the LGBTQ community. So you've got a huge gay population that are doing it to one another. But as, children reach adolescence where, sexuality becomes part of their identity, sexual themed content is more oftenly exchanged through one another. Well, if I disseminate that with an intimate lover or just somebody who I'm dating, whatever it may be, as the child ages, it becomes more of a phenomena that is, But the thing is, when we're looking at I'm glad you brought this up, man, is that with sextortion, it's also being used by online child pornography consumers and distributors. Because, for instance, and you guys know, I'm sure your listeners know what catfishing is. Well, I set up an online profile.
Why don't you explain that, Michael? Explain what catfishing is.
Well, catfishing is basically using, a profile and technology to present something that you're not. Okay, that is in a nutshell. But getting back to the online child pornography is that I set up a profile. All right, I'm 53, okay? But I set up a profile that I am 16 years old. I am a freshman at the high school that is one county over from you. You're a female freshman that's going into the high school that's next to me. Well, I spend the next 3 months courting you online. I create false images. I can even put a GIF or two, GIF together of a small video using Instagram so that you think that I'm the 15, 16-year-old that you think you're talking to. Then I engage with you in an online relationship, and I get you to slowly but surely begin to disseminate and release sexual-themed content. Once I get you to do that, I now come out and say, look, I got you. And that is where sextortion begins. Because once I can get a little bit of once I have something like that to hold over your head, you're done.
Right, right. And I want to get, before we get into that, I want to get in the last few minutes, we talked about prevention. I also want to get, before we end, Michael, what are the warning signs so a parent can recognize that there's something going wrong with their child and how they can maybe correlate it to something in cyberspace. One of the other questions that came in, I think we answered already, how much of this is done, the cyberbullying is done because it's easy. I think you've answered that. It's that anonymity, the ability to reach so many people, and really not put yourself at risk or expose yourself in any way. Very cowardly way of doing it. Would you agree with that?
Most certainly.
Right. Okay. Now, let me just get another question here. Other people are asking, what about social media like Facebook and the platforms, social media being one example? We always ask them to look out for terrorist events. We put the onus on them. What about cyberbullying? Should we put the onus on these social platforms to look for these and take action? And are they doing that? Do you know?
Should we? Yes. Are they doing anything about it? No. Okay. Most of your social media platforms, particularly in the United States, under, freedom of speech and First Amendment and all this wonderful stuff, and, open source, open platform, they're providing an environment. It's up to the attitude, behaviors, and, of the people. I believe social media, whether it be Google, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, needs to become more actively involved to set parameters. Again, if anybody wants to join Kane, just in Google Plus alone, when you see the garbage that online users are sharing with one another, the garbage, the vitriol, and again, I'm not religious, the evil that you see, it becomes infuriating, to where you're like, why is social media, why isn't Google Plus or Facebook doing something about it? Well, the other thing being, in defense of these social platforms, well, when there's 100 plus and 1 billion or 100 plus million people, it makes a little bit difficult to be able to go after and to target, and to be able to find what I call the eye predators.
Right. Matter of practicality.
Unfortunately, yes, but I do believe that social media platforms need to take a far more active role. Many of the volunteers in Kane, we get pissed off all the time because we can't understand, like, for instance, when we find profiles that need to be reported, we report them. We report them to the platform, and we do it over and over again. Well, what happens is, just like in Facebook and in Instagram and in Twitter and Google+, we'll get them shut down and banned. Well, what do? They just set up another one.
Right.
And then they go back to doing what they were doing. And if it's really offensive, we will, it's cyber tip line. We will report the content to the federal authorities, the cyber tip line. When we can, we will contact local law enforcement if we know the name, if we know the area and that stuff. But overall, there is no accountability.
It's
and if there's no accountability.
Right. It's kind of like the old it's an electronic boiler room operation, where you just you act on something, you're committing a fraud. In this case, you're committing a violent crime, and someone finds out where you are, you shut down, you open up somewhere else and leave no trace of where you've been before.
Correct.
Right. Michael, so we have a child being cyberbullying, sextortion, something like that. What can a parent look for to see the signs of a child who's going through this?
Well, okay. Very quickly is that if a child begins to, what you first want to look for is change of behavior. Okay, so if a child tends to be, reasonably open, now a child who's private, can be a private child, but when they notice a change in behavior where they're becoming more secretive, when they are, going to their bedroom or going to the garage or going to anywhere but in the public area of the home to go online. Okay, then in addition to that, a change in behavior. Now, obviously, that is also part of adolescence and puberty for kids. But a parent, my recommendation for parents as it relates to children is to ask questions, to be involved. I mean, one of the things maybe we can talk about next time, I call it digital dinner. We don't have time to talk about it now. But it is a forum to be able to have an open exchange with your kids to hopefully get them to be open, because today's children, they don't want to go to adults and talk about whether they're bullying others or whether they're being bullied, whether they're sextorting, whether they're being sextorted. They don't go to the adult system. Why? Because they're afraid if they do, what will happen? They will have to delete their profiles, or worse, they'll have their devices taken away by the adult. So the parent and the adult is the last person they're going to go to.
Yeah, interesting, because sometimes when I talk to the media or businesses, again, like workplace violence, or where there's a mass shooting, a kid does it in high school, they always say, what are the warning signs? And the problem is the warning signs are there. It's just recognizing at the time they're happening. Because we tend to blow things off. He or she's kind of moody. He or she's in a bad mood. But generally, what we see is changes of behavior, not for the better. So, like you're saying, if you have a kid who's kind of quiet anyway, being quiet may not be something, but now maybe we'll see signs of depression, maybe being a little more sensitive, being a little more argumentative, or if you're an active kid now, maybe you're more private than you were. Those kind of changes of behavior. Would you agree with that? And what are your thoughts on that?
I would definitely agree with that. But if you go back and you look at, I hate to go back to '99, like the Columbine kids, when we look at that mass shooting, is that they were bullied, they were considered quirky, they had the black trench coats, blah 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 blah, but nobody thought that they would do what they did. So really, it is for parents just. Particularly now in the information age, it's first as a parent knowing no matter how close you think you are with your child, I can guarantee you that they are not going to tell you what is going on in their online life. So you go under that assumption. So you have to be a little bit nosy. You have to present yourself as the dumb parent. Teach me, what is this and this is what digital dinner is about. What is this Instagram thing? And it's hopefully creating a dialogue with your child so that they begin to talk to you about what's going on.
One of the things I was asked about when we have some of these instances, when I deal with the media, they always ask about what can parents do to stay a step ahead, on social media. And my advice was always don't try to stay ahead, electronically or technologically. You're not going to be able to do it. That's just my opinion. And as a dad, I've seen that happen myself. So what do you suggest parents do or not do? Do you believe that they should, put like those programs on the computers, the cell phones, where they could spy on them? Spyware.
Most certainly. Yeah, parental controls, definitely. Anything a parent can do, to be able to monitor their child. But at the same time, it is important. See, today's parents of the information age child, they think that they have to be tech savvy. I'm not tech savvy, and I'm supposed to be the next father of this whole new, visionary blah, blah, blah construct, and I'm a tech idiot. It is the willingness to openness to understand that there's this new place, and it's what is the definition of cyberspace? An abstract, artificial, digital environment. It's not real. It's not real. Cyberspace is not real. I can't say, hey, bro, let's you and I go get a cup of coffee at cyberspace. It's not real, okay? But children, and increasingly even us adults, we treat it as real. So it is, as parents, it's being open to that, and it's being receptive, and it's first and foremost knowing your child is not going to come to you if they're being targeted. So one of the things that parents can do is hit home with their child and look, I may get pissed off at you, I may punish you, but I will never take your technology away. So as long as you're not a danger to self or others, so as long as you're open with me. Right. And it's beginning slowly but surely getting the child to understand that there's a safe environment when we discuss these issues. But I want you to come to me if you're getting targeted. If you sent some nudie pictures to Bobby Jones, come tell me about it.
Right, and I think you made a good point there. You want them to be open. And that is why when I'm asked a question about the spyware and this, I don't recommend it because, one, it's very hard to do. And two, sooner or later, your child's going to figure out you did it. And then what? Where do you stand on the trust issue with your kid at that point? And I think all trust is lost. And then I think your child is more subject to being victimized because they don't feel they have a partner they could go to.
I agree with you somewhat. I take the approach is you do what is necessary, what you feel comfortable with. I've dealt with parents that are clueless or resistant or politically, philosophically are against it. I'm like, okay. So then what you need to do is to have digital dinners. You need to sit down more with your kids. So if you don't want to go the technology realm, then you go the non-technology realm and spend a little bit more time sitting down with them. If you see your kid isolating in their room and you notice when you open the knock on the door, you see them on their mobile device, well, you got to think there's something could be going on.
Right. All right. Max, that me? I'm not coming across? I'm good. Okay. All right. I just got a little message I want to make sure. All right, Michael, we only have a few minutes left here. Tell us about your webpage. Tell us any appearances you have coming on, any books you have coming out, and where people can find your work.
All right. Well, I don't have any books. I hate writing. But anybody can go to my website. I don't know if you're going to publish it. It's iPredator. Matter of fact, and again for your listeners, is you know what a hashtag is? Is Google hashtag iPredator and click on images. You will see some of the educational images I've created over the last 5 years. I think last time I checked, I don't count them. There must be at least 300 to 400. So hashtag iPredator. Click on images when you Google, and all those images, at least the first 300, I created. My novice graphic design skills. But I also use those to educate kids, to educate when I presented in Vermont and Colorado. So... And then the website, ipredator.co.org or .net. All the information there is free to download, to share, and you don't even have to attribute me. I couldn't care less.
That's very generous, Michael. We appreciate all the work you do on this. As you mentioned, do a lot of this for free, helping people be victimized. Thank you for sharing your expertise with us, and let's you and I stay in touch, all right?
Thank you for having me.
All right, man. I'll talk soon. Thank you, Nucci. Hey, thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. Very insightful conversation about cybercrime. And for all the parents, if you have any more questions, feel free to tweet them to us later or get me on Facebook. I'll be happy to send them over to Dr. Nuccitelli or to other experts and get you an answer. Very important issue. Our kids are suffering in silence, and we just simply need to stop the bullying and what it leads to. We know it leads to depression and even to suicide. Thank you for joining us tonight. Once again, I always have to ask, please go on our Facebook page, like us, go to YouTube, subscribe to us, and please spread the word. We appreciate you following us and our ever-growing audience for all our shows. I'm Michael Tabman on behalf of Crimes and Times. Good night.